Mark de Grasse, and you're listening to Podcast Mark. I have a very special guest, Brad Ball. He's actually somebody I've worked with for several years now, a digital marketer and within the marketing space. We actually were in Costa Rica last year at the Commitment Summit. And you do a lot of awesome stuff. And you're an artist, which I love. So today we're going to be talking about some AI. So welcome to the show, Brad.
Well, thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I always I don't warn people who come on the show, but I'm like, yeah, we're talking about business stuff, but it's going to lead into some kind of philosophy, self-development stuff. So just be ready for that. And I think you're set. But it's all tied with this AI thing, because I think, with AI, what's really happened is the next revolution, and we haven't really had one since I would say the dawn of the internet that was like as significant as AI starting to be used widespread. But there are limitations with it. And so I thought we could kind of talk about, kind of what AI is and what AI isn't and how it impacts branding and design.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we're in that age. I think we're in two ages right now. One of them is the age of the influencer, and the other one is the age of AI. And we can touch on influencer later, but it's, everything's about a person of influence. And if you think of naming companies, it's generally you don't name them after yourself. That's just a rule of thumb, because you can never separate yourself. But right now, everything is about the individual and less about the company. And so trying to navigate that as a business, because we've always shied away from being the faces of our company, because it's not about us. But same thing with AI, in the sense that you've got this tool that allows you to do all these things and in some ways clone yourself, so you can do a lot more as an individual.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's one of the most empowering things that I've seen since, again, the internet or computers, where it's like, oh my gosh, I can now multiply my efforts by 10 times, 20 times. I have one developer friend who I said, hey, you really need to try ChatGPT. And he's like, oh my gosh, there was a project that would have taken me 40 hours and I got it done in 2. And I was like, yep, that's the power. But with that said, it's not magic. And I think some people are, especially the new people who try it, are like, yeah, I tried a couple prompts and it was whatever. And I'm kind of like, okay, you're doing it wrong.
It's not about prompts. Don't go by prompts. That's the worst thing you can do.
You can use them as examples, That's why I give them away.
Well, we've got a prompt. It's 3 pages long.
Yeah.
And so to really tell the AI what it needs to do, it's got to be thorough. And a lot of times it's like, depending on what you're doing, I do LinkedIn posts every day now. I write everything myself, but then I'll run it through ChatGPT just for editing or just a different way to word things, because I'm very good at brain dumping. And then it just kind of compiles everything down, and then I edit it, because there's words it uses that I won't normally use. And so I want it to be my language. But then I'll also run into Midjourney or ChatGPT or even Adobe Firefly for imagery, just to play with, because it's kind of fun. And some do better with certain concepts. Like today was ChatGPT. A lot of times Midjourney's better, but it's interesting how one gets it and the other one doesn't, and vice versa.
On different days too. Like you could do the exact same prompts one day on Midjourney, and the next day it's something wildly different, and you're like, what is going on here? So I think number one is it's not perfect, but you can't. I think it is the best launching off point that I've ever had, where I'm like, man, I have an idea. It's going to take me a while to develop. And prior to this, I would probably just kind of forget about the idea. Like, it's not really worth the effort, so I'm not going to develop this. But now I'm like, because I had this concept about how to change education, where I said, hey, if we could just personalize lessons to the individual and their interests, then they'll retain the information. And so my son was, memorizing the phases of the moon. And we were kind of talking about, we're like, man, but what does waxing gibbous mean? Like what's a waxing and what's a gibbous? And so we started breaking down the terms, and you can find the explanations online, but I was like, man, this is just not registering. So I was like, okay, explain to me the phases of the moon in terms of building a house, because I understand how a house is built. And so then it did it. And then I completely understood it, and I can explain it to anybody. And prior to now, I wouldn't have even tried it. I've just been like, I'm just stupid. Like, I'm not
My
gonna.
business partner actually uses that analogy for like hosting web domains, building a house. You have your foundation, you have the framework, but you also have your taxes on the real estate.
Uh,
And so when you think of how you break, you've got to have your domain registered somewhere, which is basically the land. And you go through those different pieces like, oh, that makes sense because we understand the things that go behind a house, but not necessarily the nuances of a website or all those details, unless you're in it all the time.
yeah, but then at that point you have like an advanced understanding of what this is, and that's the super basic, and so you're way past that. But yeah, the initial understanding, and it really, I think that's where the blockage comes for people learning new things, where they try to get into it and you're kind of like, I guess I don't like this because this is too complicated and I don't understand it. And I did the same thing last year when I was like, I really want to design an airplane. And so it's just always seemed neat to me. And so I started building it, and I was like, okay, now I need the electronics and everything that goes into it. And the more I looked online, the more I was like, oh, everybody does it different and it's kind of complicated, and what connects to where, and all these different factors. And so I literally created like a whole new business concept of like, oh, what if there was just a single box that you could basically put all the electronics in, and then you could slide it into an airframe, and then you could crash it as many times as you want. And there you go. But even that concept I wouldn't have come up with if I didn't go into AI first and say, like, here's what I want to achieve. How would I do that? And then it spits it
Mhm.
out based on how I understand it. So I think that, have you found a way to get people to understand AI in a way that it's not just like, it's not magic and it's not, perfect.
I mean, not specifically because everybody uses it a little bit differently. You got some people that are just zeroing in, basically selling the process behind AI. Hey, do this, and you can eliminate all your copywriters,
Hmm.
or you can then go sell this to other people. And it's not getting into the real depth of the purpose behind it and really the creative aspect. Because I see AI is eliminating a lot of jobs, but not necessarily our jobs as creative people or as agencies. Your production people, within the next few years, they're gone.
Yeah.
You got Canva pulling in AI and doing some different tools. So production wise, things are going to move a lot quicker. Copywriters, they're getting limited. You're either going to be a high level copywriter. No more of this, hey, all these blog posts, AI can do it to some extent with one editor spitting out tons of content. As it relates to the creative side, as you were talking about, it's an ideation generator,
Mm.
meaning, hey, I have these ideas, I have these creative thoughts. For me to then sketch it and draw it out. So if, I'm going to present or pitch a video or a commercial to a client. Okay, so I can concept it, but typically we would draw out storyboards
Mhm.
and then provide that to the client. Well, now as this AI continues to evolve, I can storyboard really quickly some sequences of images to tell that story. And I did that with a furniture client. They do a lot of photography, and it's like, well, this is like Midjourney 2.0, which really was pretty poor.
Mhm.
But it kind of created, okay, put this sofa in the middle of a ranch, a desert ranch with the sun setting in the background with longhorns in the back, that type of thing. And it spit out a pretty good representation, even though it wasn't perfect as a concept, it didn't have to be perfect.
Mm.
Perfect. So then I could tell that story. This is what we want, and then you can actually go out and shoot the exact photo that you need.
That's great.
But you still have to have that creative mindset behind it. So there's an art to really being able to utilize and manipulate the AI to get to what you want. And I think it's always going to be that way because until AI becomes self-learning or sentient, meaning it doesn't need human capabilities anymore, which they say we're there, but hopefully
I
we're not. But
No, no, we're not. Well, because even if
because
we were, it screws itself up.
yeah, but AI has a ceiling, right? Because it's learning what it knows, what we as humans input into it. And when that's maxed out, which if you think of how fast it's been learning, is probably pretty close. It's going to continue to learn and evolve, but it's also constantly being taught what to do.
Mm.
And so when we stop telling it what to do, does it keep learning on its own? No, we got to keep managing it and moving it. And that's where really the creative thought thinkers, I think, become differentiators in this new age.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think you're totally right because it's, everybody's worried, oh, AI is going to replace everything. I'm like, it literally can't because it needs our input. Otherwise, it just has no information and it can't innovate itself. I mean, maybe at some point it could, but I think it's pretty far off from doing that. It's almost like, a person. And right now
Yeah.
it's a baby, or maybe it's babbling some stuff, but it's not developed enough to even understand what it's saying or why, or a million different reasons. And honestly, it's not like there's one AI, it's a bunch of instances of the same programming maybe, but it's completely different every time.
Well, and really what AI is going to replace, I think the most, like ChatGPT specifically in that tool, is going to replace Google.
And I've said the same thing. I'm like, that's
Because you don't go, yeah, you don't go to type in Google, hey, I need to know about this. You go into ChatGPT and it's going to spit out all the information you need about XYZ much faster and detailed without having to go to the research or other sites, which is going to have an impact on SEO and businesses because how then do you become relevant in that AI search?
Well, and I think that's why, everybody said this, but the paid advertising is going to get increasingly expensive because it's going to be kind of the last resort we have to connect cold, other than doing cold calling and literally reaching out to people constantly. And so it has to be that way. But what's going to matter, and it's actually a good thing, is that as advertising costs increase, the goal will be to retain the customers, right? Because that's the only way it'll be profitable, which will mean you need better services, you need better customer care, you need better products, you need better operations. Everything has to be more efficient because all your profitability comes down to retaining customers, which I think for the last 10 to 20 years has been, hey, there's always more customers. Like, screw them. Like, we don't need you.
Well, for us, we were talking earlier about just our January or something back to normal. A lot of that, we've gotten a lot of old customers that left that have come back.
Yeah.
And, in a couple of weeks at our committed mastermind meeting, I'm going to be talking about the 20-year relationship. Basically, I've been around personally for 24 years now in this industry. And I have clients from the beginning that I still do work with today, and actually about to go into a marketing plan with one of them for the next year. And how do you keep a client for over 20 years?
Well, that
And yeah, and to me, there's much more value in that than churning new business all the time because you're really serving and providing a quality product to your customer. So they keep coming back. And even when they leave, we bless people when they leave. And that way, and we'll even help them along the way. We've had clients that they've left, but we've maintained their hosting or website. And at some point they revolve back around. And, it's that to me in this age is much more important is the relationships than not necessarily new sales, because you need new sales to continue to move forward and grow. But it's a lot easier to maintain a client than to close a new client.
Yeah, well, and we've all known that. I mean, we've said it for the longest time, but I think now it's becoming a requirement versus a nice to have. Like, oh yeah, I hope we do a good job, but at the end of the day, we have churns, whatever. We'll just keep on cranking things out because that's what we know how to do. But I think now, since money's contracting too, where people have less of it to spend, they're getting much more discerning on who they work with. And even your backstory. And I think, like you said, it's the age of like the personal brand where it's like, no, you have to have this personality and you have to be at the forefront because now people aren't going to trust a faceless corporation because we've done that for the last 10 to 20 years. And I don't know about you, but I pay a lot of insurance and I don't feel covered in any way. I'm actually literally concerned about something breaking because I'm like, oh God, I wonder if this will just increase my rate and I still won't have it fixed.
Oh, insurance is a whole other animal. I went to a coach or a health share this year because we're healthy. And I mean, the rates were going to be 2,200 to 2,400 a month for a family.
Oh, that's why
that's a lot of healthcare for people that don't use it that often. And meaning I could, $20,000 of money that I can put to anything, that'll go a long way for quite a bit of time, unless there's something major. So the health shares, I think it's going to $650 a month now. and it's Zion Health Share, and we've used it a few times. The teledoc works really well. The prescription's been cheap. It's been good for us, but we're healthy, and so um, I think that functions much more as health insurance should. A
Mhm.
lot of people use it as a crutch as opposed to a tool, and that industry is so broken with rates. Like if you go to pay cash pay to a doctor, it might be $100, whereas insurance is going to say it's $200 or $300. But what do they actually pay? And so I have so many stories, employees, and of having a procedure that's say $50,000, and they find out the cost is only 10.
Yeah.
And so you're like, there's something wrong there. But that's a whole
Well,
other.
well, I think all of those stories have just led to this view of like, okay, big business. Well, it's kind of funny too, because as you work with bigger and bigger companies, the customer care gets worse and worse and worse. Like they're outsourcing it to who gives a crap, and we don't care. And, yeah, they don't really speak the language, and we haven't really trained them very well, but you'll get somebody on the phone, and then you'll learn that you shouldn't even call us because you're never going to get anything done that way. And so I think we've all had these experiences, and now we're just kind of like fed up, where we're like, wait, now it's 10 times as expensive and I still don't get anything done.
And you might be talking to a bot at some point.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, that's the next phase where they're going to fire all
Yeah.
the people anyways. So now it's like, well, at least we're supporting, a third world country to have jobs and whatever. And now they're going to get rid of that. So now it's going to be like, okay, so I get a crummy service. I get a dishwasher that breaks after 2 years that you don't support or
Mhm.
even make parts for, and you're not going to help me fix anyways. Why am I doing this?
So we're in an interesting time. I want to kind of rant back to where we were. So with kids and teenagers into high school, Snapchat, TikTok, everybody's scrolling really fast. We just got done, our family in church, with a 21-day fast. My kids actually turned off TikTok, and my daughter put it back on, and she's like, I don't need to go do that. Because you just get stuck in that mode. And when you
Oh,
think about just it happens in the workplace, and AI just it makes things a lot easier. I think at some point you're going to have or snapback, where people are going to go to where they value real relationships. Even with the Apple Vision Pro, I've seen some videos that just look so crazy and weird. People wearing these things
yeah.
at the dinner table. I'm like, that's just the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I can
Just
see the tech of it, but um, personal connection is what most people want and need. And when everybody is zigging, how do you zag?
mm,
And what I've been training my team or talking to my team about for, let's say, 5 years, is as these Facebook ad prices keep going, as the Google ads keep going, as AI throws a lot more content at us because people can just post multiple times a day without minimal work, how do you differentiate yourself from the noise?
mm.
You're an old ad guy. What I believe is things like billboards, postcards, mailings, traditional advertising are going to be cheaper ways to reach your customers,
Absolutely.
because printing is an industry that's almost died, but it's still there. And at some point, and we're already there, where Facebook ads are much more expensive than doing the print pieces. You may not have specific ROI. You can do the digital ads with QR codes and whatnot, but you know how many people are actually getting your postcard. And it used to be a rule of thumb: 3 touches before they recognized you, 7, and you'd probably have a sell. That was kind of the sequence of the events. Now it's hundreds or
50,
thousands, depending upon what it
500.
is. Yeah. If you're trying to sell a car, it's into the thousands of impressions before you get a sale.
Yep. Well, and that's
That's
is that efficient.
Yeah, and that's what I see is going to be an issue pretty quickly. Is AI is just going to make all of social media and everything out there just a muddy mess, and trying to distinguish yourself from that is going to be key.
Oh yeah. Well, and like you said, I just printed a magazine. So I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I think print is back. And not just print, but I actually just had a meeting with Mark Stern. And what his company does is actually make these boxes for, like, you remember P90X, you get P90X,
Oh
have
yeah, oh
a
yeah.
notebook, it have a little card. So his company actually works alongside any service business to produce these boxes custom to their plan. And so it's like a checklist and a, set of cards for figuring out which marketing methods you should do. And I'm like, man, that is golden, because I think everybody, not only is it too much information, like we're too flooded with too much stuff, we still have a large population that doesn't even know how to use technology in general, and they're getting farther and farther away as it develops. So they want to go back to like, hey, could you just send me a letter once a week and tell me what to do? It's like, that's back. And it's actually a great thing because it gets rid of all the noise, because, even if you're trying to check your email, you got the tab for Facebook right next to that. You got your Google Doc open, you got your calendar right there. And now what they're trying to do is fix the problem with the new VR set, where it's like, no, now you can organize your digital data not on a single screen, which I think is very helpful. And I'll probably end up getting it just
dopamine hit, dopamine hit, dopamine hit.
Dopamine drain is what it is. It's,
yeah.
It's like take. And yeah, no, I think everybody wants it. And honestly, I'm a huge proponent of AI and everything tech and apps and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm a fan of people getting solutions that work more than I am of how those solutions are delivered. I don't actually care how they're delivered if you give me something I need.
Yeah, if it makes the process easier, safer, and more efficient, all for it.
Cheaper.
At the same point, giving us the ability if AI gives me the ability to have more time with my family, that's even better. If I can get outside more and not be stuck at the computer all day. And that's the big thing with AI is, how is it going to make our lives better? If it just keeps us at the computer longer because we're doing more things, but not actually enjoying the things that we should be enjoying, then there's a problem. And I think that's what most business owners have a problem with, is they get into business. So I'm going to do this and my life's going to be better. And they get into it and they're still working 60 to 80 hours a week because they're doing everything.
Yep.
And at that point, they don't really own a business. The business owns them.
Yep.
Until they can get outside of it and actually trust other people to do the work and build a culture around that, where you can take a vacation, you can work 4 hours a week if you want, whatever that is for each individual. Then you built a business that's sustainable and has the chance to grow.
Oh yeah. Well, and the cool thing is that AI is intimately connected to that, because at this point, whenever I make a new process for, say, okay, I need to teach somebody to do this thing, I don't have to have like all the answers, and I don't have to rely on them to have any answers, because I can give them, in addition to the process, a prompt where it's like, hey, at this stage, feed the information you've gathered into the prompt, run the prompt, and then that's your output. And now you can apply that to whatever thing you're doing. So I think even, if people need some way to conceptualize, like, how do I use AI to make things better? It's that. One, and writing processes, man, that's been super helpful.
Well, that's what we're using. It is, we're going back and redoing our processes because we have a doc that we used to have. How can we simplify it and make it easier, almost like an education platform? And you kind of alluded to it, but the big thing as it relates to AI moving forward is probably GPTs, because you're talking about, hey, you need to run this prompt and do everything. Well, you just write your GPT and log it down or have it open, and people download that and they run through that GPT and it gives them what they need. My digital marketing director did a presentation to our staff, because he's going to speak on it in a couple of weeks, about why agencies need to be developing and implementing GPTs. And he's like, this was the App Store when it first launched. This is the AI App Store. And
I love you said
all
that.
those out now.
Because that's literally what I've been telling people. I'm like, man, GPTs, that's the next iStore. Like, it's the next Apple, because what people are going to find out is that they could develop any app to do anything that you want instantly for free, and then solve problems with it. Because the whole model that we used before, which is, I developed a solution based on my experiences, and now you could try the solution too, doesn't work most of the time, because our individual situations and maybe even how we approach problems and solutions is completely different than the person who created that process. So it's not going to work most of the time. It'll get you on the way. And that's what we have kind of become accustomed to, which is like, hey, everybody has systems. Let's all learn each other's systems and we'll try them. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then who cares? That's just life. But now you could just have like a process. And so that's what I tell people in terms of like, what does the future look like? It looks like formula creation, where it's like, hey, I'm not going to tell you step by step how to do anything. I'm going to say how I made this process to solve my problem, and how you could use that lesson to now create your own process to solve your problem. But it's not a cut and paste, because we've been trying that forever. Well, and honestly, it just leads to a bunch of businesses that look like each other. It's, look at Instagram Reels and TikTok, and you're like, who copied who here?
And now they all look the same.
They all
the
look
algorithm
the
is the same.
And it's like, this is boring. Like, but honestly, and that's the other factor of AI I always talk about, which is the fact that now we could do programming that's cheap and repeatable and readable and transferable. Like, that's the revolution. Is programming doesn't have to be hyper custom like it's had to be to date. It can now be general and easy. And I hate to say, but we took the power of the programmers. Now, I'm not worried about programmers, because they're going to be like superheroes moving forward.
Yeah, and it depends on the level. If you're talking about building websites, in 3 to 5 years, I don't think we'll be building websites, or at least traditionally. There's some pretty cool tools out right now, like Reloom, which does mood boards and wireframes. The problem is it can go into Figma, but Figma doesn't transfer into HTML or Webflow very well. So you have to rebuild it. But at some point, that's all going to get fixed. Even with code, it can write code, but there are some limitations, or it doesn't always get it right. So you still have to have that developer know how to use it. It just can make their job easier. And with GPTs and stuff, we're in that process of playing with certain things, even code, of, okay, here's a sequence of code, use this as a guide to write this, those types of things. Because once you give it enough parameters, then it can learn and spit out similar sequences, let's say. But a lot of people don't necessarily want to do the work. And I think our friend Roland Frazier, he's probably the genius behind it. Like, when he talks about all this AI stuff that he does, and it looks fine and amazing. But what you don't also know is and I'll talk about it a little bit, but all the work behind the scenes that make everything work. All the stuff that they do is insane. And AI can't do that part. That's the humanity and the creative side, to be able to see it, piece things together, and then implement it.
Oh yeah. Well, it's kind of like, there's a video on YouTube. It's called Rock, Paper, Scissors, and it's by this organization called Corridor Digital. And what they did was they used AI to essentially create like a really high-end looking anime film. And it looks like, oh wow, they used AI to make an anime film, and that will cost millions of dollars. But then if you watch the video where they talk about the process that they used to create the movie, it was like super involved and super technical. And yeah, it wouldn't have been possible without AI. But even in that instance, because you always see those videos on TikTok where it's like somebody's like dancing, and then the whole world's kind of shifting around them in weird ways. Like, that's standard AI. That's what it creates, is this weird dreamlike sequence, which is useful for some people, but it's not like, I can't make a movie out of that. And so they had to engineer a solution for how to convert that kind of weird transition during movements into something that was stable. And they figured it out. But you're talking about guys who have done graphic design and videography and video editing and programming and all these different things a million times, and they figured it out, and it's great. But it's not magic. Like, make me a movie called Rock, Paper, Scissors as an anime classic. That's not how it happens.
Yeah. No, definitely 100% agree. And that's what's going to be interesting, is seeing the creators behind the scenes have the ability to create some amazing things. And it is going to have an impact in our industry in many ways. I think it actually is a benefit to creative agencies that actually do the work. But much like Netflix, how Netflix has impacted movies, you don't go to the movie theater as much. They still are there, but box offices are way lower. Does that mean people aren't watching as many shows? No, they're watching a lot more just at home. And when you think about it, the quality of shows is way better.
The same now.
And so, instead of watching a 2-hour, 3-hour movie, you're getting 8 hours worth of shows, and it's developing stories, and there's a lot more into it.
Well, and
So
it's unlimited too. I think
yeah.
that's, well, what's funny is I remember movies in the 90s and I used to love movies, and I go to the movies and I remember being sad when they ended. Like I was like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, that's the end of the journey and it's done. Like the Goonies. When I first saw the Goonies, I was just
Oh,
like,
Goonies is classic.
what an adventure. Like that's so actually I was kind of sad after it because I was like, why don't me and my friends find pirate ships anywhere? And so I had this vision of like, okay, that's reality. But I remember the stories were just so fantastic because they had to be. And I think that's one of the problems with Hollywood or just, big blockbuster movies today is they cost so much and there's so much that goes into them that you can't be risky because it could bankrupt you or bankrupt the entire industry essentially. And so it's led to this formulated process of just garbage, and now we're bored. And
And what's
so
funny is the riskier ones are generally the ones that are the best.
yes,
You know,
they
I
always are.
remember Guardians of the Galaxy when it came out. I'm like, oh, that looks dumb.
Yeah,
When you sort of felt the previews, and then it was one of the best ones they ever made because
it
it
was.
wasn't the same as everything else.
Oh yeah,
And
I was
I
like
think
Thor
that really,
Ragnarok too.
Ragnarok was one of my
Oh,
favorites.
so
But
good.
I think that applies what we're talking about, right? Is you have this model of things that people are doing, and how as creators do we differentiate ourselves from that? And that's what Guardians did in this onslaught of uh, comic movies. And now they're in this flux right now of having to reinvent themselves again.
Hmm.
And so I think as agencies, I made a post today about being in a niche. I've never been a proponent of niche industry. I believe in verticals, but if you were in the event space in 2020, you got shut down. Your business disappeared. And there's a lot of businesses that are very cyclical, or oil and gas. It's up and down. It's feast or famine. And so, how as an agency do you set yourself up for success? And I think starting out, niching is very good because you can build systems and processes and be able to develop the infrastructure to grow. But once you have one down, then you migrate to another one and you build out verticals versus just staying hyper focused on one thing. Now, some people can argue that I can understand both sides of it, but same thing with AI. We can go deep into it, but we're going to have to really look at it from a holistic perspective of how is this going to really impact my business and other businesses to ensure long-term success.
Well, and I think that the key is that last word you said, which is long-term success. Because I think up until the day, and even when I was interested in entrepreneurship in high school, I was always thinking in terms of how do I start a company and sell it and make $1 zillion? Like that was my mindset. It was never how do I build something that could just stand the test of time because it continues to evolve and develop, and my customer base just grows because it's so great that they just can't imagine leaving. And I think we're getting back into that. We're getting back into like, how do I make something lasting? Because like when I sold my company, all I realized was that I'm just going to start another company. And now I just let go of this thing that took me so many years to develop. And now I have to start again from scratch. Why the heck would I do that? It was making money. Why would I think that just a big payday or whatever I was trying to achieve would solve the problem? Because well, I think it's just that fallacy of retirement too, where it's like, oh, you'll work your whole life and then you'll sit on the beach. And it's just like, what?
No.
Why would it? What if I die? What if nothing happens like I thought it would, which has been my entire life? So now it's like, how do I satisfy my personal needs and my motivations while also helping everybody else around me to get what they want, and then just continue to do that for as long as I'm entertained by the process, which
Yeah.
was another realization I had. Whereas if I'm not doing something interesting, then I'm going to grenade it or I'm going to leave it in some other way. And so it's made a lot, it helped me a ton because now I'm like, okay, I have that understanding. So I better make sure that I'm having fun. Otherwise, I'm just going to stop or be
Yeah.
bored.
Yeah. We have a phrase as a company: we work to live, not live to work.
Ah, love that one. Yeah.
And so,
Sounds obvious. It's
yeah.
harder than you think.
And people like to compare that to work-life balance. And some people, oh, there is no work-life balance, but there has to, and balance may not be the right term, but it's the purpose behind what we do is the most important thing.
Yes.
And if you're getting fulfillment and joy and fun out of what you do, then you're in a great place. If you hate your life, then you probably should find another job
Yeah.
or business.
Or examine yourself. Because I mean, for me personally, like I thought I knew what I wanted, but what it ended up being was I just didn't understand myself at all, or my motivations, or I had buried things that I wanted in, you know, the shadows, and just decided to not acknowledge them rather than addressing them and being like, hey, why don't I like that about myself? And what does that say about me? And what's the experience behind what that is? And then I'm able to understand who I am. And now I could go out and be like, oh, I have a purpose because I know who I am. And that's actually the biggest discovery you can make. And that's why it's kind of like, I hate when people kind of demonize self-development as being selfish, where you're like, well, I just don't have time to meditate, jerk. I have to make a living. And you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's like that profit first mentality. If your business can't pay you that 10% or whatever it is, then you're already behind the eight ball. You already have failed in the process of being a business owner.
yep.
And there are seasons, like,
Yeah.
we went through a rough patch of, the industry as a whole, and churn and layoffs. And that was back in August, September. Leads just went to crap and weren't great. And then they kind of picked up November and December were great. I mean, November's fine. December was really good, and January's been a good month. So leads got back to normal. Three old clients returned, which is rare.
Oh, that's so cool.
Actually, it was four. I forgot we had one more come back,
Huh.
and two of them were six-figure type projects.
Wow.
So you can't complain about that.
No. Well, and that's actually the best part of this, because I was in real estate when the 2008 crash happened, or actually I had left right before it happened. And what it did was it essentially cleared out all the people that shouldn't have been real estate agents and brokers and lenders in the first place. And then you end up with the people who were actually dedicated to the profession and the service they provided, and everybody benefited. Not that it lasted forever, because now we're in the exact same situation.
Yeah, and it's about to snap.
It's about to snap again.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I've lived through this. I know what's going to happen. You guys are, being cute about the
Well,
real estate market.
a lot of real estate agents have already left.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. But like in our area in Dallas Fort Worth, it's they're back pretty close to getting multiple offers again, and that influx. It's just, we live in a crazy time. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, but but at the end of the day, if you're dedicated to that profession, if you're dedicated, I just love putting people in homes, and I love connecting them with the dream they've had for their whole life. Like, man, you keep on doing that. And yeah, times are going to be good and times are going to be bad, but no matter what happens, you're doing the thing that you want to do. And if your answer is always like, hey, well, I need a paycheck, that's why I do what I do, it's like, man, that's a bad reason. Like, you need a better reason. Examine that, and you'll be a lot happier.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you so much, Brad. This has been a fantastic talk.
Yeah.
I would love talking AI, but I think you have a really intuitive understanding of the market, because you've been doing it for 20 plus years, and you've seen all the trends, all the modern trends. And I'm actually really happy about the development in the industry, in terms of, like, I think we're getting back into branding, back into good organization building as a part of marketing, instead of put money into Google or put money into Meta and you'll make money. And who cares how it gets there, and who cares what happens afterwards? Like, I think we're becoming all more present, and it's thanks to agencies like yours that small businesses are going to be able to have access to that. So with that said, where could people learn more about what you do?
Easy way, bradball.com has my website. So Ardent Creative is our agency. We have a software company called Verity, but if you just go to bradball.com or go on to LinkedIn or Facebook, my handle is I am Bradball. It used to be Bradball Art, but it looked like Bradball Art, so I had to change it to something a little more memorable.
You got tired of being called Mr. Ballart?
No, nobody ever did. It just hit me one day. It's like, that's a little confusing. So I changed it so it's easier to remember.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm posting every day on LinkedIn, weekday on LinkedIn, just trying to build that up. And some of it's just business development, business ideas. It's all me. It's not, like I said, it's my thoughts of that day. I don't have a 30-day game plan, even though I've been told I need to have 30 days out. It's what's happening in my brain at that moment, and that's what comes out.
Love it. Well, I love what you do, and I think it definitely gonna have you back on soon because I'd love to talk about the art side of it and how art
Okay.
kind of connects with branding, because I think that's a huge missing piece that is an easy piece if you really think about it. Like you just have to decide, but most people don't.
That's one of my next things I'm developing, because as an owner, trying to speak a little more, how do I funnel that into my agency? Because we're much more high end than a lot of your niche agencies. And, it's not, it's a harder customer avatar, let's say. But the whole branding element, that's really probably what I'm the best at as an expert. AI, people say they're experts, and I'm like, well, you really don't have enough experience yet to be the expert.
I don't call
Um,
myself an expert, and I use it
yeah,
constantly.
yeah, but you know what I mean. But when it comes to branding, like I'm actually working on, I just met with the attorney yesterday on getting a trademark for something new, but it revolves about what branding is.
Mm.
And you have brand story, and brand story is, copywriting and that story. As designers, it was a logo and colors and everything else. But when you look at a brand, it's much bigger than that. It's everything about a company: mission, vision, culture, colors, fonts, what people see when they see you. That's a true brand. And so that's what I'm going to try to start to develop out, is an avenue around just that whole circle of brand influence.
Fantastic. Well, I'm 100% on the same page, because that's why I made, the first course I'm doing after digital marketer is the AI branding boot camp. And essentially it's exactly what you're talking about, because it's broken down into 5 style guides where it's like, no, it's everything. It's literally everything you guys do. And if you're not doing that, then you're just losing out on opportunities at every instance to, reinforce your brand and create something that people remember. So yes, definitely gonna have you
Awesome.
back on. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you for listening. Tune in next time for more podcast Mark and awesome guests like Brad Long.